This episode was sponsored by Property, the leading real estate agent for all real estate transactions with a comprehensive ecosystem. They combine highly trained experts with the latest technologies on an intelligent platform to provide clients, brokers, and service partners with risk-free, flexible, and simplified services. Learn more at property.com. That's property with an I.com.
87.7% of entrepreneurs have a mental health issue. This is a Founders Report study from 2024. It can be anxiety, it can be loneliness, it can be depression, it can be burnout. It's a reality, and it's important to address it to help founders overcome it.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Merle.
Hi there, this is Merle. Unfortunately, we had an issue with the audio cables and the quality isn't ideal. However, the content is so valuable that we still decided to share it with you. So stick around for the full conversation. I am sitting here today with Sahar and Charlotte, and we're talking about a topic that I'm very excited about, which is the mental health and the importance of mental health, especially as founders. But first, let's talk to you both and see who you are and who's sitting here with me. So, Sahar, you were the co-founder and CTO of a scale-up called Novigenics for 10 years. So maybe first of all, you can tell us who you are and what this AI MedTech company does and what you actually do now.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. Actually, thank you to Innovo for having me part of this. I'm very looking forward for this discussion. I'm a co-founder of Novigenics. I was working for 10 years as a CTO, general manager, and also the executive board member. And we developed a platform for data analysis of patient samples. So I think we are all familiar with the heterogeneity that you can see in the cancer patient, especially when the tumor progress responding to the treatment. And what we developed, it was actually how we can combine the advanced machine learning with a large set of patient clinical data, annotated, clean, and there we can actually learn from all this patient immune profile and gain insight and provide that to the patient. And today, Novigenics providing solution for biopharma where they're developing drugs, and they wanted to understand why a patient is responding to a treatment and why not, or early detection of the cancer. So that's another angles that they are working on.
And now today, you don't work at Novigenics anymore,
True.
Correct?
So I left Novigenics last year, and since this year, I joined Prevision Medicine, another spin-off startup at Zurich, especially, and they have a remarkable product, again, for patients.
Wonderful. So you're staying in the field, and we will talk about this also later on. But first, I also want to introduce our other guest on the show, which is Charlotte. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You were
Great to
already
be
here for the last episode that we did with Innovo as well. But maybe you can just also quickly introduce yourself in case somebody has not listened to the other Innovo episode, which of course would be unacceptable. No. But maybe you can introduce yourself and then also tell us why the topic of mental health is something that you think is important and is also something that you usually address with the scale-ups that you work with.
Mm-hmm. So yes, I'm Charlotte Ducrot. I'm in charge of all the scale-up programs at Innovo, which means we have one is a scale-up VO community. So companies that qualify as scale-up using the OECD definition of 20% growth 3 years in a row get the label. Companies that are based in Canton Vaud, obviously. And once they get the label, they can join a community where we connect them at different levels, at CEO, CTO, CFO, and head of HR level with peer exchange opportunities so that they can learn from one another.
And the other program we have currently is leading to scale up for pre-scale ups for CEOs who are about to scale. We'll get into it later on. But that's what I do today. Mm-hmm. Regarding the topic of mental health, I think this is a topic that's been really taboo for many years. I think pre-COVID was totally taboo. And I think with COVID, things have changed. In general, I would say outside entrepreneurship. I would say in my case, the first time I heard it in an event, in a startup-related event, was FootHack 2022 in Lausanne. And there was an investor who actually did a talk on mental health, raising awareness. He was one-person talk, and he raised awareness of the importance of the mental health of founders. And I was really impressed because it was the first time I heard about it. I had it in mind before that it was never addressed, but it was the first time I heard about it. And then I think since then, after the years of COVID, I think it comes back more often. I remember, for example, the Seed Night organized by EPFL, where they present the new startups. There was a keynote speaker, Michael Friedrich. He was the CEO. Now he's the CEO of Distar Motion. Mm-hmm. And in his speech, it wasn't about mental health. It was general, but he brought it up again, saying, when you raise funds and when you raise millions and dozens of millions, people look at you like, you're covered now. And it's actually, no, this is just the beginning. And it puts a lot of stress on founders and CEOs who have to deliver after raising funds. And so I think now it's a topic that is more addressed. Now you're addressing it as well. Thank you for that. And it's very important because the figures show it. 87.7% of entrepreneurs have a mental health issue. This is a Founders Report study from 2024. And it's, it can be anxiety, it can be loneliness, it can be depression, it can be burnout. Yeah. But it's a reality, and it's important to address it to help founders overcome it.
Yep. And to understand that they're not alone.
Exactly.
And this, I think, is also very important. So let's dive into the topic. Is it possible to protect your mental health as a founder? And before we talk about your path and what happened, I also want to talk about what is it like at first when things, are at a very early stage, I would say. So Novigenics was created in Lausanne back in 2014. And after finishing your PhD in 2009, you worked for 5 years at Diagnoplex before you actually then founded Novigenics. So maybe you can share with us what also motivated you to change from working in a startup to founding your own?
Very good question. Actually, if I wanted to say something about myself, I think I get to the conclusion after 17 years going through different challenges of startup, I have an entrepreneur DNA. And actually, I enjoy somehow to go to different challenges at the same time. And now somehow it becomes more my passions to helping the startups to scale up and develop a strategy of going to the market and getting to the market fit. So if I go back actually to 2008, it was before I finished my PhD, I met two founders of Diagnoplex, Professor Coursier-Roueg, who is professor at the University of Fribourg, who is still my mentor in any questions I have about the oncology, immunology. He's always becomes like a friend and like a mentor. And there was Stavros Terianos, I would say the CEO I learned a lot from. I met these two guys, and it was just before ending my PhD, and I was hesitating to join Roche as a biostatistician. And they just start talking about their idea of the house response. They were the pioneer of house response for early detection. So we know that cancer patients, they are heterogeneous. But how the house is responding to growing the tumor is important. And if we can get that signal early, we are able to detect the cancer. I loved their idea immediately, and I said, I'm going to join you in this journey. And to be honest, I had no idea what does it mean at that moment. And I was not a founder of the company, but I think I was very committed to that company. And I joined two other biologists. So I was from data. I had a PhD in statistics and data analysis. And I joined two other biologists. And I had no idea that 6 years later, the three of us, we're going to found a new company. And And we were so committed to bring this product to the market. And in 2008, 9, I think we know very well the market and how was the situation. But however, we've been able to raise 25 million. And yes, exactly. Everyone said, wow, you have 20 million. You can go everywhere. You're free. But it was not that easy. I think that's the most important part. We had a very linked team together and we worked day and night. And I think for biotech at that moment, it was very difficult to raise the capitals and also to deliver. And especially that in the US, we were seeing that the biotech company growing radically. But we've been able to develop a test, which name is Colox. And it is in the market since 2013. On 2013, actually, at Diagnoplex, we've been able to sell 100 samples. It means 100 patients out of pocket pay to be screened for colorectal cancer. That was amazing, but it's not always so rosy. At that moment, actually, we are so happy to be able to sign a contract with the medical laboratory to sell 100 tests. There were competitors in US that they just get to approval of FDA approval.
Okay.
And I don't know how can I explain, but that feeling was like you have the best scooter and you're riding your scooter, but there is a Mercedes-Benz or I don't know today, Tesla with the amazing technology just past you in a glance of your eyes. It was like, okay, I didn't see it right.
Yeah.
And then it was in 2013, it was very difficult to raise money. All the VCs starting to say, okay, now biotech, it's not a quick exit. It's just jumping to the very significant, risky and high and long journey. And that's how I can say that it's somehow ended at Diagnoplex. We have decided actually with 2 other biologists to do a management buyout. And we found Novigenics.
Okay.
That's how actually we get to the founding the Novigenics. But the interesting part is we were 100% scientific.
Yeah.
And we had no idea of pitching and no financial was with us when we found the Novigenics. And we have to create all this momentum to going and discussing with the VCs, family offices, and angels that I actually, at that moment, I didn't know what's the difference between.
What is an angel?
So that's how the journey of Novigenics. But it's amazing. It was incredible. It's a new journey. You go and you're creating a company. That's amazing. But what I wanted to mention more is, if I look back from the Diagnoplex period, maybe sometimes we say, it was a failure. But to be honest, I feel it. I mean, I think all the other founders and all the team members, it was an amazing journey. We learned a lot. We went through up and down. We had very difficult moment. Bringing a clinical test on the market, going to different clinical study. Every day you had new things happening and you have to solve it. And you have to make a decision at the same time, so quickly. That was amazing journey. But yes, I didn't know what the startup looks like. But I think as an Iranian woman, I learned to fight what matters. And I think that was actually somehow, I know that we're going to talk about resilience. That's helped me to understand the most important culture in the startup is resilience. And you need a team that they can understand that. And they can actually work and walk with that resilience through the journey.
And then when you moved with your colleagues to Novigenics, or you founded Novigenics, what was your vision at first? And was there also already, when you mentioned resilience, was there also something in that vision, not only in terms of this is what the product should look like, but also from this is what kind of company we want to shape?
Actually, when you found the company, you have an amazing idea. But sometimes there is a gap between what you're thinking and what is the reality on the market and what is the perspective from outside. So at that moment, we just wanted to save patient life. And I think that was the main idea at the beginning, how we can get this product live on the market. But then the reality is, okay, you wanted to do that, but how are you going to do it and how are you going to make it? And I think that's all the journey you go through, and to see, okay, some part of that you can't do it as you wish. And you have to find the best solution. And I think that's the moment of the startup. You have always be creative in different moment. Novigenics was founded to sell Colox on the market. And today we have a data platform to generating the patient data, but in very large, different angles.
Very interesting. You already mentioned also that you raised at Diagnoplex, I think over 20 million. And then at Novigenics, you again raised a total of almost $25 million, which is impressive. But funny enough, you only started raising in 2020, so 6 years after the company was founded.
Yeah. So it's always as a startup, you're doing a lot of bootstrapping. I think that's the way, especially now, I can say it's even worse with the new market, how you will live every day with the investors that are asking a lot of questions, how they want to invest. And I think sometimes I heard at the beginning that startups is like a marathon. You have to go and you will see the end line. But I don't have this vision. For me, especially about the investors, it's like a never-ending roller coaster.
Yeah.
You raise the capital and you don't even have a time to celebrate that. You are thinking how you organize the next investor hunting. And it's just that one part. The other part is when you have an investor, you have the pressures. You have many, many milestones on your shoulders and you have to deliver. At the same time you deliver, you have to think about, okay, I promised a lot, because a startup, you overwhelm yourself with the promise. And I promised a lot, so I have to deliver. But I need also, because I know that deliver that, I need that much money. And that's become like your journey of going and finding the best bootstrap for the moment. So that's how I experience that in startups. I mean, I can give an example. Sometimes the investor tell you, okay, I need to know having a laboratory, it's good enough that I can invest in. So for that, you have to show me there is a revenue. But I cannot generate a revenue if I don't have a lab.
Yeah. And it's a chicken and the egg.
Yes. Exactly. And the other part, for example, is that you have to go and find a non-diluted grants. Yes, definitely. But if you ask InnoSwiss and all the grants that you're submitting, they are asking actually co-founding. So I need a co-founding to be able to get the grant. So it's never-ending circle.
Yeah.
And I think that's how the things happen. And I'm very positive with how we did it. But that's, I think, many startups going through this bootstrapping.
When you look back, like in hindsight, how did the pressure feel different when bootstrapping versus with the VC money? Because I'm sure they're both equally exhausting. But is there a difference?
The VCs are more structured. Means that they really come with a very clear milestone. It's difficult to get them in, especially now for the biotech. It's really, really difficult. But when they are in, I mean, when they define or they sign, so you know exactly what you have to deliver sometimes. And there's a very clear milestone-oriented investment. But when you go to the family office or angels, they invest with their feelings. Some of them, they had a family members actually died by cancer. So it's more emotional. It's sometimes more difficult because it doesn't help you to be focused. I think that's one of the main problem at the startups. You can do many things, but how you stay focused. And I think that's one of the mental health issue actually, because when you're not focused, you're jumping from one thing to the other. You're taking all these pressures on your shoulder as a founder. And from my experience, I was like more the investors, VCs investors, because you know what they're waiting for you and what you have to deliver. Even though it was very difficult, but you know what they're waiting. So if you don't get it, it's failed or it's not passed. But with the family office and the angels and all this bootstrap, the pressure is different. And sometimes becomes conflict of interest in the process. And I think that's very difficult because the VCs are very clear. We invest that much. We need a board seat, and where are we going to actually be involved? Are we going to support you as a strategy? Or are we going to support you as a board members? Or, that's how it doesn't work. But the family or angels more, discussion, emotional, and then sometimes some of them, they want to be more involved or not involved. So for me, it was, that's two different experiences. But we need to, as an early stage of the startup, it's difficult to have a VC, especially in the biotech. You have to start with the angels, family offices, and then...
Yeah. When did you know that Novigenics went from a startup to a scale-up? Was there a point? I mean, we have the statistics or what the definition would be, but when did you know that it was a scale-up?
So when you see that somehow the attraction from the outside about your product, I think that's the moment you think, okay, I'm going to scale up. It's very smooth. The changes or transition from startup to scale up, it's very smooth. So you don't see it and suddenly...
And sometimes goes back. You start scaling and then you go back to, you start hiring 5, 10 employees more. So you're like 15, 20, 25, and then you go back down to 8. Yeah. So it's not a smooth kind of straight process.
Exactly. You're right. It's never easy actually to say, okay, because you have to take a risk. Sometimes, you have a promise from the VCs that actually, or investors that they're going to invest. You said, okay, but they already put a milestone on the desk. So you don't have a team because you cannot hire the team because you don't have the money. But at the same time, oh God, I have to deliver that, and how can I do that? So that's some sort of how you bootstrap, how you reduce the cost at any moment of the company. And I think the first moment you can feel that there isn't a scale up, it's when you see the attraction. You see that the people are coming. For us, it was like, okay, the biopharma companies are contacting us. Oh, our technology can be used in other direction that we didn't maybe even initiate it properly. So that's how we started scaling up.
Maybe a way of saying it is you start getting calls rather than calling people, no?
That's always a good sign.
Yeah, that's a very good sign, I would say. But I think it's the other part is when you stop getting calls. At the beginning you get, and I think you're right. And I think that's the moment that, okay, did I get my market fit properly? Because then you say, oh, maybe I was too excited and I was thinking I'm ready to scale up. And I think that's something that I now, when I talk with the people, I'm doing some sort of advisory with the startup, I'm always telling them, be careful before jumping to the scale up label. Be sure that you are getting to your market fit and you are sure that the calls will not stop.
And it's going back to your point of focusing, because you get a calls, to open a market here or there or explore whether geographically or industry. And then you're like, oh yeah. And then, you get excited. Yeah, I want to do this and that and that. And then you have to refocus because you cannot grow in many, many different ways at the same time.
And there was a program, actually, where I met Charlotte for the first time. And I think that was amazing for me because it's a program between Innovo and EMD leading to scale up. And there I met many founders, CEOs of the region. And I think that's the moment that I was actually learn a lot from outside. Yeah. Because you are in your problems and you go with your problems daily. And then I said, oh, I'm not alone. And actually, it was it's still now today, after 5 years that I did this program, it's still very connected to this group that we do together. And when I left Novigenics, actually, there was a group that's supporting me a lot. I met them, I had a coffee, and they just helping me. You're going to make another startup, I know. So, yeah, I think this kind of program also is very helpful for the founders.
And you mentioned before, like, all the different people that you're involved with in the startups. So that's like the VCs, angels, the team, your co-founders, customers, all these different parties that you kind of have to accustom to. What, looking back, was the one that put the biggest pressure on you, if there was one?
I was expecting you to say, what was the best, give you the best feeling? I would say team, difficult. Yeah. Difficult question. Different challenges. At each stage, you have different pressure. When you go from startup to scale up, the feeling is amazing. But you have to learn to say no because you have very limited time per day that you can actually put on your work. And I think in the startup life, I think sometimes the investors, they don't see how they can put the pressure on the founder or a company level. Be an example, I think 1 month ago, it's one of my colleagues was in a startup day somewhere in Basel. And actually, when he told me, I was surprised. There's an investor openly said, I will give my founding in a company that the founders sacrifice their family. And when he told me, I was really shocked. I said, I'm a mother of 2 young boys. I would never put anything priority to them. And how this gap can exist somehow between the reality. And I think that's sometimes, if I have to go back, I think sometimes the pressure, mainly sometimes from the investors, it was high. Yeah. From the other side, I think personally, when I had all this pressure, if I reflect back, I would do exactly the same. I was trying, and I think we are all people and human. And for me, it was important to connect to the team. And I think that was the best energy I could take every moment. And when you're connecting to your team, and you work together, there are a lot of pressure also from the team, especially when you scale up. They have different expectations. The moment you are starting hiring people, they would ask also more. So there's also a lot of pressure from the team. But for me, it was a team I could go back and count on them. And it was a recharging mode for me.
So for founders listening, what are some best practices or learnings that you could maybe share with other founders?
Yeah. Do sport, eat well, don't drink alcohol, don't smoke, sleep. No, I cannot give an advice. I can just reflect on myself. If I had to do it again, I would put myself first. Okay. Understanding and learning to say no. I think that's very important because at the end you have 2 hands and you cannot take more, and you have 2 shoulders. You cannot put everything on your shoulders. But then for sure, I would say, don't say I'm going to rest after the milestone. That was my trick. There is always another milestone. Mm-hmm. So one thing that helped me a lot at the beginning, I try always to take 1 hour early in the morning in my agenda to reflect. I think reflect and connect with yourself to see, because at the end, it's the value you created, the company is the most important for you. If you see you are getting far and far from your value, I think that's sometimes that you have to reflect early. And that's help you to see, okay, am I in a correct mental health or not? There is no correct and not correct, but somehow to see actually the red flag somehow that show you, oh, be careful. And the other thing I would say, I think we are always, as a founder or even as a human, we are taking everything on our shoulder, and I think we can do it. But it's good to have coaching and therapy. And personally, I met Charlotte, I asked Charlotte actually, and I had one coach for 1 hour meeting. After that meeting, I wrote my resignation letter.
Oh, wow.
So just to tell you that sometimes you need other people to help you to see the other side of the problem. And
to put perspective.
To be exactly. And I had a sister always telling me, breathe in, breathe out. I was always laughing. So you don't understand. I'm in the trouble. I have so many things to solve. Why you are telling me that? But she was right. The moment you breathe in, you just have a moment to reflect inside yourself and say, okay, what I'm doing, where I am, and why I am accepting all this. Yeah. It is not your value, and it's not what you wanted to do in your life. So don't do it. If you or change it. If you can change it. And I think that's a moment that you can also reflect. We have many wars everywhere in the world, and at the end, if you look at the problems that we are solving daily, it's small comparing to what's happening in the world. And if we can only just reflect on that, maybe taking time and think about it, I think maybe we can see the red flags better. I will do it every day. I will try to do it.
I think that's a really good tip, actually, because I think often people don't well, first of all, don't take the time, but even maybe don't even realize that it's necessary, because we're wired to deliver, and we think it's normal. And it's normal that you have stress, and it's normal that you feel under pressure and that you have to deliver these things. But one day at a time, sure, it is normal. But if you look at the whole thing and you see that it's not normal, if it's every day for years, then no, this is not good. You need to then take a step back. But you can only realize when you take a step back.
Exactly. Chronic stress is the worst.
This episode was co-produced with Innovo, the innovation and investment promotion agency for the canton of Vaud. Check out www.innovo.ch/EN to learn more.
This is also something that I want to talk to you about, Charlotte, because you mentioned the program Leading to Scale Up that you do together with IMD, and you also look at mental health in that program. Can you tell us maybe first why this program came to life? Did you see a pattern with the scale ups that you have, and then you brought it to life? But also, what do you offer to scale ups in that program?
So Leading to Scale Up is a program that helps startup founders to go from startup mode to scale up mode. Really, the objective is to prepare the CEO to face the challenges of scaling. And actually, those challenges are similar across industries. So the group is actually industry agnostic, because the challenges of scaling up are pretty much the same in any industry. The reason why we designed this program is because there's a lot of support early stage. And then at Innovo, we have this Scale Up Vaud label, and we help scale ups. But there's a big gap between the early stage and the moment you become a scale up. And that's why we thought, well, there's actually a need for support and helping those founders change their minds. Because, you know, we mentioned earlier, once you raise your first big round, you're like, oh, I've done it. I've reached my product market fit. Like it's going to be good now. And you have no idea that it's just the beginning of the worst, basically. I mean, it's just going to get really, really bad. So this is why we designed this program. And the content of the program is basically 10 sessions on scaling topics. It goes from organizational design, so internal design of the startup. How do you build your board? How you scale with partners? And a lot as well around the leadership of the founders, because you have to grow as a founder and a CEO to be able to continue grow the company, basically. And the format is really simple. It's 10 sessions in the evenings. It's from January to June. So it's one session every 2 or 3 weeks. It's a classroom of 10 to 15 founders or CEOs. The sessions are given by one professor from IMD and one serial entrepreneur, because it's really important to not just talk about theory, but actually see the practice. So it's people who've gone through the topic that is addressed on that day and share their hands-on experience. And something that you mentioned that is really valued from this program is the peer exchange among the participants, because you sit down next to other founders who are exactly at the same stage, just at that, inflection point of you've passed early stage, you're about to scale, and you realize they're facing the same challenges. So all of a sudden, you're not alone anymore, and you can exchange, and you see they face the same challenges as you are, and they can share also solutions or the way they've overcome the challenges. So yeah, it's a program we've been running for 4 years now. The next cohort is open. It'll be from January to June 2026. Applications are open until end of September. And it's open to anyone, any founder, startup founder or CEO in Switzerland and even abroad. So if people can come to Lausanne, fly in and fly out, it's also a possibility, or just take the train. We've had the founders from Zurich, from Neuchâtel, from pretty much anywhere. So
that's great. Mm-hmm. And you also have a course in there that's about resilience. What do you actually mean by resilience? Because you said also something about that it's important to build up, and it's important that the whole team also understands what resilience means. So I would be really interested to learn from you, Charlotte, what it means for you in the program, and then to hear from you if this resembles what you also think about it.
So this year in 2025 was the first time we included a session on resilience. And this came because it was a topic that was coming up in the sessions. And we thought, well, it's time that we address it formally. And by resilience, basically, it's capacity of people to be able to overcome challenges and rebound afterwards quickly and not being burnt by the challenge, just like you go and you move on, basically. I mean, you solve it or you don't. Maybe you fail at solving it, but then you move on and you're ready to face the next challenge.
Is that also what you meant with resilience?
I have always this cartoons image, I don't know if you've seen, as a startup image, that there is a car or train is running and the people are just trying to build the car. And it's actually, that's for me the definition of resilience. Means that the train is running, the car is running, your startup is running, but you have to be so agile at the same time to build it. And you see, I built it, but the other thing is not working. So I have to be also the other side. At the same time, you solve the problem, but you move forward.
Yeah.
And then not diving only in the problems. And I think for me, that's a definition of resilience. Not staying and say, this is a problem, and not bringing any solution. True, every day there are challenges, but bringing the solutions every day. And I think that's for me the definition of resilience.
And I would add to be able to recover afterwards, because that's a key part, to be able to face the next challenge
or like being fine with it and accepting that it's a moving dynamic thing, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
How do we build up resilience? I know we didn't take the course, but maybe you can give us a sneak peek in like how somebody can build it up.
I think there's a few things. I think first, to build resilience, you need to build self-awareness. You need to understand yourself and learn how you function. And then you have to build some systems that will help you build resilience. And one of those systems is you need to learn how you deal with stress and understand stress. Stress, you have acute stress, you have chronic stress, and acute stress actually can be good and it can make you more productive sometimes. And it's fine if you deal with it well. Chronic stress is the one that is really problematic because it can lead you to burnout, basically, and it can bring a lot of health issues. And once you understand this difference, you have to know how you deal with it. And basically, first, you need to understand what are your stress signature. How do you identify stress in your own self? What kind of behavior comes up? How does it feel inside when you're stressed up? And once you're able to do that, then you have to find a way of regulating stress on the moment, because there is something coming up, a challenge, you're facing stress, and on the moment you have to do something because you cannot be taken over by stress. So how do you regulate? And again, that's very personal. Everyone does differently. Maybe it's breathing, you were mentioning before. Maybe it's smiling. Maybe it's, I don't know. Everyone has their own thing, but you have to come up with your own thing. And then the third thing is being able to recover after a stress moment, because the whole thing is about recover. I mean, not the whole thing, but it's if you don't recover, it's going to become chronic stress. And there's actually an author and therapist who wrote a book, and she identifies those three steps by realize, regulate, and recover. You just go through those things and start understanding how you can manage with stress. So beyond, managing stress, there are other things that you can put in place to become resilient. Is surrounding yourself with people who are supportive, your management team, your board. If they're supportive, then stress is going to be easier to deal with than if they're not. Having a life outside the startup, we were talking about this earlier, building an identity outside the startup. Because if you build an identity outside the startup, first, you do something outside the startup, but also if it fails, you'll have something else. If your whole life is built on the startup and that's all you do, it's really hard to fail because this is your life, So it's really tough. And then I think being strategic about, I think you mentioned it also before, about your time, how you manage your agenda, where you spend your mental energy for your work, where you spend your personal time as well. So being very strategic, obviously, was the strategy of the startup, but being strategic with your life in general and how you deal with things, how you make decisions. You were mentioning as well how the importance of sometimes just taking a decision. It's better to take a fast decision than not take a decision at all. If you manage to understand how you make decisions and how you can improve that process, that also helps. And last but not least, and again, you mentioned before, is the values and how you're aligned with the mission of the startup in this case, and the way you manage the startup. You have to feel aligned, because the more you get away from your values, the worse it's going to get, and it's going to generate stress. And that's then the whole negative circle, no? So I think it's a mix of learning to know yourself and how you deal with different situations, stress, and then how you strategic with basically your whole life.
Yeah.
Because the more you have systems in place, the more you just follow the instructions, your own instructions, because you build those systems and you follow the instructions. And when you follow the instructions in a case of crisis, when you know, for example, there's a fire now, we know we have to move to the fire exit. We don't have to panic because we know there is a sign, there's a fire exit, we just leave. As a founder and a CEO of a startup, you have so many things to deal with. So the more you've built the system, the better you can just go with the flow, and you follow your own instructions, because at the end of the day you built those, and it generates less stress. And if there is stress, because there will always be stress, then you can also know how to recover from stress.
Basically create yourself an exit route out of the stress situation.
Yeah, exactly. Connect to yourself. I think that's the most important, because there you see, what is the value for you and how far you are going with that value, how much you can do that. And I think it's very important about the recovery. It's like you run a marathon, you need always 1 week to recover. And I think
one or more.
Definitely. I never ran. But I think that's exactly the thing that we sometimes forget when we are in the middle of the crisis, especially, and you keep going and you don't think about the recovery.
And sometimes it's not even a crisis. You were mentioning before, you raise funds and you don't even have time to celebrate because you're already thinking about the next round. Yeah. You actually have to take the time to first celebrate with your team as well, and celebrate because it's a milestone. And then there's always time for thinking about the next round. And then you focus on what you have to focus on now.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's also building a team which are resilience is important. And I think it's very important to distinguish between resilience and hard worker. It's very different.
Yeah.
And I think that's personally, I think if I have to define a culture of startup, you need this resilience, because you need to be able to get from one chapter to the other, one challenge. And you have so much uncertainty around you, and you have to make a decision sometimes so fast and accept the failure, because I prefer to fail fast instead of continuing and going to the direction. I feel, it's good, I'm still here, but I know there would be something later on. And not accepting that and continuing, I think that's very difficult, and I would avoid it. And I think, a team that can support you to be in a high resilience environment would be helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then again, also the team then is part of this system that you have.
Yeah.
The checks, also checkpoints, sort of. And something that you mentioned earlier that I was wondering as well is, you mentioned therapy and coaching, and that you have a mentor as well. Do you have any tips for people that are looking for a support system, a support network, kind of where they could find people?
So there are thousands of different coaches, and I think it's very difficult to find a good one. I was lucky I knew Charlotte. Personally, I think if the program, like I mentioned, that we've been with the other founders, they go through that, it's amazing. There's another program Innovo organizing sometimes.
Mastermind?
Mastermind,
I love a mastermind.
And it was interesting. Actually, one of the first time I found, wow, I'm blinded and I don't see the red flag. It was in one of that session.
Uh-huh.
And we were discussing, and I just expressed challenges I'm going through. And then suddenly there's one person look at me and said, change it. And it was so obvious for him.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like an wow mountain. I will never be able to change it. And it's true. And I think it's not only having a therapist or coaching, also sharing the idea. And you mentioned very well, I think the board of directors is very important, to having a support from your board, and normally you're co-founding, you have 2 other or 3 others co-founders, have a good relationship with the other founders and trying to not being alone. And I think that's helpful. Just surround it. We are human, as I said, to be connected with the team and the people that they can actually give you that energy. It's not only going to the therapy and just talking to the people. It could be also this kind of program that can support.
And I also think something that's helpful that I realized is if you already have been in a situation where your mental health has suffered, there are signs, right, that people see. It can be the sleep, but it also can be how you act, how people receive you. Mentioning this to people, it's like, if I ever have this, tell me, because maybe I'm blinded. Maybe I'm so in the depth of things that I don't realize myself. But if you can just tell me that you show signs, you're not sleeping well, they're like, you've been telling me this problem over and over and over again, maybe something is up. Maybe you need to take a step back. And this also helps sometimes to just have these anchors of people that tell you signs.
It's a very smart thinking. And I think sometimes it will happen even worse, that your body actually stop. And somehow as you get sick.
Yeah, true.
And then when you get sick and your body tell you, okay, now you went so far. As your body, I can't continue that way. And I think that's kind of sign, but still sometimes happen. You get the sign, you say, no, I'm going to go away. I will continue. And I think if you get this kind of red flag, even from your body reaction, it could be you have an eczema or everywhere. You have a red dots for no reason. Or you feel that you have food poison. That's happened. But to be honest, I think sometimes that's a chronic stress. And then you can also even get the cancer or other type of disease. That's important to think about it and be aware about that. But that happened, yeah.
Maybe just to answer your question on what people can do when they're looking for support, or it's just, as you mentioned, talking to other founders and say, how do you deal with, your own mental health? Do you give a psychologist, or do you have a coach or a mentor? And people with recommendation, you might not get the right person on the first try. But recommendation, I think, are the best, especially from other founders who are in the same situation.
And I mean, you can meet founders at basically, I feel like every day there's an event that you can go to. Is it because you mentioned before that the first time you really heard about it was at the Food Hack? So again, a startup event. Do you see also in your own events maybe that you do an increase of the topic of mental health?
Oh, for sure. Actually, in the past 2 years, we've started addressing it consciously. I can give you 2 examples. So we had the Scale Up Vo label is an annual label. And so we confirm some companies who already have the label, and we get new companies who have the label. And for the new CEOs, we invite them for a mountain getaway, 24 hours in the mountains, so that they can meet each other, the new ones. And we also invite a few veterans who have been in the community for a while. And it's a topic. So it's a very small setting. It's 10, 12 entrepreneurs. Everything is under NDA. It's very informal. And we've been addressing this topic of mental health because it's important, because it's taboo and it's not often addressed in other events. And also to show how others are doing, how others are dealing with their own stress and mental health. And also to raise awareness that on this topic of, it's not because you're becoming a scale up that now things are going to be easy. They're just going to be really, really hard again. So because it's important to warn and to raise awareness, because then people don't find themselves in like, oh, but this is really hard. But it's actually, they know it's coming. So we've been doing that in that mountain getaway. And the other example is the mastermind that we're mentioning. So mastermind is a session that we do for CEOs where they can pitch a challenge in front of 5 to 10 other CEOs. And following a certain methodology, they receive feedback and recommendation on how to deal with the challenge. And the challenge can be anything. Often it's a challenge that they cannot share with their team, or so it's something that actually they need other CEOs to help them with. But it's not necessarily related to mental health, but just the fact that you're able to share a challenge with other CEOs, it's under full confidentiality. And that you get feedback is a way of supporting mental health as well, because they know that they can come up to us and say, actually, I'm facing a challenge right now, and we can organize one of those sessions, and then they get some feedback. And we're proactively addressing this topic either directly or indirectly because it's important and because startup life is really challenging. And if you're not resilient, then you set yourself for failure, basically. So if you manage to become resilient, and then you give yourself a chance to succeed.
Mm. And Sahar, now you mentioned at the beginning, you're now working at Provision Medicine as a chief quality officer. And I was wondering how your work environment now is maybe different or healthier than prior to your current work.
I have a privilege to work with an amazing team at Zurich. That's a spin-off from ETH of Zurich, and they have truly remarkable product. And I always wanted to be involved in something that bring impact to the patient directly. And, today each individual reacting differently to the treatment and what they developed, and it's 10 years, 15 years of experience. They develop a technology that we can test 100 drugs at the same time, ex vivo, with the biopsy of the patient, and seeing and measuring how the cells of the patient actually reacting to each treatment. And it's amazing. I think this is going to move the next personalized solution, to be honest. The regulatory, it's a barrier, as we know. That's why I took the most challenging title as a Chief Quality Officer. I have to say that I'm very happy to join that team. And it's true, I'm not a founder of the team. But I really committed that the product worked and we can bring it and scale up for the patient. And I think that's resilience and resonate again with my value as a person. So I'm very motivated. But saying that, I agree with you that the feeling and the pressure is different than when you are a founder. Yeah. So I have the same pressures. We're looking to VCs. At the same time, selling the product. We also are finding the fund to make the labs to generate the result for the patient. But the same sort of stress that I went through, but I see it lighter.
Okay.
So either it's because I'm not a founder or I learn to do it differently.
Yeah.
And I try always, because there are 4 founders that I really enjoy working with them. And I try to tell them all the time, Abby, cool down. Take your time. You have to see, we cannot go, hey, you have to go fast. You have to do. Yes, one thing. And try to actually bring my experience and my luggage from the past. Yeah.
Which I'm sure is very helpful for them as well.
Hopefully, yeah.
And to end this conversation, I want to ask you both. I think we've established that it is possible to protect your mental health through the ups and downs as a startup. But I would like to ask you, we've also talked a little bit about how we can do that. So what is something that you want the listeners to take away for their own mental health, for their journey in their startup?
I would say be proactive about dealing with mental health. Learn how you act as a person, learn how you react to stress and other challenges. Learn what makes you feel good and what makes you recover from stress moments. So I would say be proactive about dealing with your mental health, because if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it for you. Get to know yourself, your triggers, how you can regulate stress, what makes you feel good, what makes you recover from stress, so you set yourself up for success. And if you fail, it's okay. If you don't burn out, you'll start again, So as a founder, often it's rare that you don't try again and work in another startup. So the best you're prepared, the better it will turn out.
You said everything. What I maybe add is, if I was a founder again today, I would avoid to say, I will rest after that milestone. And take time for yourself. And I think you said very well, take time to connect and to understand what is your limited. I think that the limits, you are the only person, you know it. And I think you have to be honest with yourself. As you said, for example, if I react that way, please remind me. No, you have to remind yourself that today I'm not the same person. I'm getting to my red flags. So define that somehow in advance. And the last, but the most important, because we are all going to the investor life as a startup, do the same due diligence they are doing with you to find your investors. And don't let their conflict of interest get you far from your value in your life. And I think that's you repeat it as much as possible, because when you don't have money and you wanted to find a solution, you get whatever sometimes happen, you get what's happening, but do the same due diligence they do with you, because that's important. You have to get through this journey with them. And I think that's good to select them.
I think these are very, very good takeaways. And the last thing that I want to add is the 3 R's that you said. I really liked them. It was something like reflect, react,
realize, regulate, recover.
Realize, regulate, recover. I love that.
They're not mine, huh?
But I really love the recover. That's something that you don't think about it. And I think that's true. That's the main definition of the resilience. And I think that's important. Because otherwise you don't survive.
Yeah, very true. So I hope that this is something that people can take away from this conversation.
Yeah, and thanks again for bringing up the topic on this podcast, because it's so important. Yeah. And I really hope some founders will listen and think about it and, be more conscious about this, because that will help them in the long run.
Yeah. True. Thanks a lot. It was very amazing. I mean, it's a very interesting discussion.
Thank you both for being here and for sharing as well. I'm very eager to see what happens next for both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.